Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. And so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessie Hadfield, and I've included Jake, my husband, on this presentation because we do a lot of this together. And although he's not presenting with me today, he was instrumental in putting together the content for this presentation. And I am the Utah 4-H Agriculture and Animal Science Specialist. So that means I get to do a lot of youth education in relation to animals and which I love, but it's always fun to talk to a more mature audience that's ready to talk about um, the really cool things that come with meat rabbits in agriculture, and especially with our small farms and sustainability. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn off my video, just because since we're looking at the screen, I just don't want to glitch with internet. So just so that you guys are aware of that, I'm going to turn that off. So with the meat rabbits, the ABCs, I wanted to give you guys a brief overview and answer some common questions when we're getting started with meat rabbits. And my slide is not working. There we go. So we're going to talk about assessment, breeding, and culling of our meat rabbits. When we're talking about assessment, what we want to do is we're going to look inward at what we have and what we want and make a plan. I love this quote from Benjamin Franklin about failing to plan is planning to fail. So that's ultimately what the A in meat rabbits is assessment. Let's make a plan and decide what we're doing. The first thing that we have to do is assess our goals. Rabbits have 3 common uses in the United States, and I'm assuming that if you're sitting here at a presentation titled The ABCs of Meat Rabbits, that you're focused on that meat fur option. But you may be like me and have a combination of all 3. We raise meat rabbits, but we also show competitively, and we consider our rabbits to be for companionship, and we raise rabbits with good personalities that also make great pets. Regardless of what your goal is, you need to know what characteristics are going to help you be successful with that goal and be able to make smart goals. So whether your goal is self-sufficiency for feeding your family, connecting with agriculture, maybe you want to feed fresh meat to dogs or other pets, or maybe you want to get into fur production, know your goals and know how to measure them. The next thing we're going to assess is your knowledge. So I just want to ask you guys to ask yourselves on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at? With 1 being very little. I saw meat rabbits on the list and decided to hop on and see what they're all about. Or 10, I already have meat rabbits and I'm feeling pretty confident about where I'm at. I'm just hoping to learn more. And if you're on the lower end of that scale, maybe a little afraid of jumping in, what I want to just really stress today is don't overthink it. The 4-H motto is learn by doing, and I fully believe in that. And I also believe in just jumping in and getting your feet wet. This quote, learn the basics and then start doing, it's the very best way to learn and grow, is so true when it comes to meat rabbits. So in an effort to just learn the basics, I wanted to go over some basic terms and phrases, just make sure that we're all on the same page with that foundation. With our doe is our female rabbit, buck is a male, kindling's the act of a rabbit giving birth, a kit is a baby rabbit, and a litter is a group of kits born together, or you could consider them to be full siblings, or twins or quadruplets or whatever. And so hopefully we all have a basic understanding of these terms, but something that we always get caught up on, especially when we're getting into our meat rabbits, is breeding terms and phrases. And so being able to assess your goals and your knowledge and understanding these terms and phrases is going to help you be successful. So I just want to talk briefly about the difference between purebred, pedigreed, and registered. Purebred rabbits have a known lineage of the same breed with 4 or more generations. Pedigreed rabbits, which are typically also purebred, have a full pedigree of at least 4 generations. And a registered rabbit meets the specific breed standards. They have to be inspected by a judge, and they also have those same qualifications of being purebred and pedigreed. Something that's unique about rabbits that is different from some of our other species, especially our other livestock species like cattle or horses or dogs, is that rabbits are bred to the standard. So that means that there is a published standard of what these rabbits should look like and some of their characteristics. And as long as they fit that standard, then they are considered that breed. So these terms may seem kind of arbitrary, but it's so important to know what you have or what you are going to have or what you're getting. Something that we also need to be aware of is the difference between composites and meat mutts. A composite, such as the Tamuk, and I'll talk about them a little bit later, are strategically mixed rabbits with known lineage bred for a specific purpose or trait. You may have heard of hybrid vigor. That is a composite. Then we have meat mutts, which is any mixed breed rabbit with a commercial body type. And I'll even just go a step further and say that it's any rabbit that is intended for meat. They don't even necessarily have to have that commercial body type. Any mixed breed rabbit or any rabbit that you don't know the lineage is a meat mutt. The next thing that we're going to do for the A in our ABCs is assess your resources. So paramount to your success in raising meat rabbits is knowing and understanding your resources. What do you have available to you? Do you have a knowledgeable mentor to help guide and answer questions? And the very basics for housing is we need protection from the elements. Heat is much more dangerous than cold when it comes to housing our rabbits, so make sure you take that into account when you're assessing your resources. Do you have good shade? Do you have protection from the wind? Where does that hot summer sun shine? And in addition, you also need to assess what type of housing you want and what capabilities you have. Are you going to use individual cages? Are you going to set up a colony? Or are you going to do a hybrid of the two systems? And what is that going to look like for your goals? Next is care. When I bring up care, the number one thing people ask me is, what do I feed my rabbits? And I always tell them that the very best feed is the one that is accessible, provides the proper nutrition for your goals, and meets the needs of your individual rabbits. I have a background in animal nutrition, but I'm not an animal scientist in terms of nutrition at all. And I know that I don't have the knowledge to formulate my own feed and make sure that my rabbits are getting exactly what they need. So I leave that to companies that specialize in that, and I buy a high quality commercial feed that I can trust. We actually ship our feed in because that's what I found has worked best for our rabbits, but finding a local feed source is the most important thing when you're finding that care for your rabbits, making sure that you have that accessible at all times. I have a picture here of one of our litters. We raise fodder over the summer and just as a treat for our rabbits and mostly to increase the moisture and the hydration of our rabbits to improve our growth. So that's why we have fodder in there. If you have the capability to raise fodder full time, then I absolutely think that that goes into assessing your resources. If you have that capability and it's working for you, do it. The next thing for assessing your resources in terms of care is just that general care and maintenance. What are your goals? Do you want really easy to care for animals? Do you want to have low maintenance stock? And keep that in mind when you're selecting your stock and designing your housing and providing that care. Next is assessing your rabbits. So whether you already have rabbits or you are looking to get your rabbits, I love this quote, nature always has the last word, but a good rabbit herdsman has a strong voice in the conversation. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. I just think this is kind of a fun video showing this is assessing a rabbit. It's so hard to assess rabbits on pictures, but it's kind of fun to be able to look at them from all points of views, and getting your hands on your animals is going to be really important as well. And so going back to assessing your rabbits, just remember these breeding terms and phrases: purebred, pedigreed, registered. What are your goals? What are you looking for? And do you know what you already have, or do you know what you want? So going back to assessing our rabbits, what do you have? Did you get some free rabbits from a neighbor? Did you collect rabbits that had been feral for a while? And do they align with your goals? We'll talk about selection here in just a minute, but the other thing is, what do you want? If you don't already have rabbits, your future herd is determined by the choices you make when you're selecting your breeding stock. And if you find that the rabbits that you were gifted or that you found are not aligning with your goals of sustainability and efficiency, then don't be afraid to just start from scratch. Something to keep in mind is that I live by this rule. It costs the same to feed a good rabbit as it does to feed a bad one. And in my experience, a high quality rabbit with known lineage is going to be more feed efficient and healthier long term. So it's actually going to cost less to feed a good one. So let's talk about selection a little bit. So when we're assessing our rabbits, so on the left, we have a Holland Lop. This is a 4-pound fancy rabbit. and on the right is a 10-pound New Zealand. Now, if I were to tell you, you have the choice between these two rabbits and you're picking one for meat, I hope that it's a no-brainer that you're going to pick the New Zealand. Bigger is better in this case scenario. But is it always better to be bigger when we're looking at meat rabbits? On the left here and on this screen is a checkered giant. These rabbits at minimum are 12 pounds in order to breed standard. And then again, we still have this New Zealand that's 10 pounds. So this next graphic is going to show the carcass of two animals. One is the checkered giant, just like we pictured on the previous screen. Another is a New Zealand. This comparison was put up by John and Janet Ford from Raggy Bits Rabbitry, and I just think this is the best visual when you're looking at selection for meat rabbits. Both of these rabbits were 6 months old, meaning that they were mature, they were done growing. They were both pedigreed, meaning that they had known lineage. They were both healthy. They were both free-fed pellets only, the same pellets even, rose 16 to 18%. The checkered giant carcass weighed 4 pounds, 3.4 ounces. The New Zealand white carcass was 4 pounds, 15.8 ounces. So almost 5 pounds for that New Zealand carcass. And not only is the weight significantly different, but you can visually see the amount of meat on the New Zealand white versus the checkered giant. So if you're going to be feeding the same amount to the same time, it makes sense to want more product. So bigger is not always better. So if you're selecting meat breeds, there are over 50 recognized rabbit breeds, and of those, 15 are recognized as being commercial or that commercial type. So we've got our California, our New Zealand, Palomino, and the Satin, which is my personal favorite. Not to sway you one way or the other, but I love the Satin for their coat. And each of these rabbits have really distinct, unique characteristics that makes them popular. So depending on your goals, it's important to look into those. In Utah, we also have Rex, Silver Fox, Tamook, composites, and then those mixes are mutts. We're going to talk about Tamook. This is a special composite that was designed by Texas A&M University, Kingsville. They are a combination of Satin, New Zealand, Flemish Giant, and California. And basically, these rabbits are known for their heat resistance and good mothering ability. So there are several breeders that are focusing on Tamook in Utah. But these four, the California, New Zealand, Palomino, and Satin, these are the most popular across the nation. And in my opinion, like if you're gonna get into meat rabbits, it makes sense to get into a good breed. Start good, start on the right foot. Let's move into our B. So we're done assessing, and let's get into just the basics of breeding. A good herdsman doesn't just look at the rabbit in front of them, they also see the generations to come. So this kind of goes into that selection as well. So when we're talking about breeding, the first thing is gestation. So this is the process or period of developing inside the womb between conception and birth. And a rabbit's gestation is 28 to 35 days. So day one for gestation, we're going to bring the doe to the buck. This is one of the most basic things that we need to remember. Female rabbits are extremely territorial and they can be really aggressive if they are not watched closely. I always use the buck's enclosure or a neutral space, and I always make sure that I watch really close because does can injure a buck really quickly. When you are introducing the doe to the buck, you're going to look for 2 to 3 fall-offs. If you've never seen a fall-off, it can be kind of shocking and a little comical, and believe me, you will know it when you see it. And for our own rabbits, we've developed our own scale to help us keep records of these rabbit interactions. So we have a scale from 1 to 5, and I rate them when I set the doe and the buck together. A 1 means that the doe is not receptive. She's keeping her tail down, she's running, she's squealing, or she's aggressive. All the way up to a 5, which is I set the doe in and she puts up very little fight. She's very receptive and very friendly to the buck. So after we've done breeding on day 11 to 14, palpation is something that I highly encourage everyone to get used to doing. Really experienced breeders can tell if a rabbit is pregnant, and some can even count the embryos and tell potential litter size, which I have not got to that point yet, but I am getting better. So practice, practice, practice. There's lots of videos and resources online. The purpose of palpation is so that if you have a doe that is not bred, one, you can factor that into some of your other management decisions, but two, you can rebreed quicker. So it's going to save you a lot of time in terms of that cycle. And especially if you have, like us in Utah, if you do not have a climate controlled rabbit barn, then we're at the mercy of the weather. And when it gets too hot or too cold, that can affect our litters. And so it's really important that our rabbits breed the first time. And if they don't, that we catch them and get them rebred as quickly as possible. So if we know that our rabbits are bred, or we're pretty sure that they're bred, on day 28, we're going to put in the nest box. So putting the box in too early or too late can encourage a doe to build her nest on the wire. If we put it in too early, she may not recognize that as a safe place to have her kits, and she may use it as a litter box. And if we put it in too late, we may miss her kindling altogether, or she may not be comfortable using the box and still have those kits on the wire. So I aim for day 28, but keeping good records is the most important thing, because I have a doe that without fail always has babies on day 32. I also have a doe that tends to have them on day 29. So just having that, keeping good records and making sure that you can account for that is going to be really important when you're breeding rabbits. For preparation of the next box, it can be as simple as putting the box in. In the summertime, that's exactly what we do. We just put a box right in, and I give them a handful of hay. You can see this doe here. This is Dream. She's one of my good mamas, and I just put a bare box in, give her a handful of hay, and she fills it and gets it nice and cozy for her kids. So in the warm weather, that's what we do. In the cold weather, I like to put a layer of absorbent bedding, so like pellets that you use in like a horse's stall. Put that down first, followed by a lot of straw and then just a little bit of hay to encourage that nesting behavior. And I, again, just let the does do their job. We don't supplement with heat or anything else, just as long as the does have plenty of hair, and they pull that and do that. So I just took this picture off of a Google search so you can see some ideas of some different nest boxes. I definitely preferred, longer, shorter style with a perch on top so that the doe can sit and watch her litter without being in the box. And then on day 30, on average, day 30, you're going to check for kits. I typically start looking for kits as soon as there's hair in the box. So that gestation is approximately 30 days. Keep accurate records so that you know if you have a doe that's going to have early or late litters. So I wanted to go over the second half of breeding our rabbits from birth to weaning. One of the things that I hear all the time is don't touch the babies because it'll encourage the doe to cannibalize them. And I think that is one of the scariest parts about getting involved in rabbits, is the thought of your doe over cleaning or potentially eating her young. And I just want to say that one, it's a myth, and two, it is very rare. Rabbits do not typically eat their young. It's a stress response. And as long as you are doing everything you can to take good care of your doe and provide her with what she needs, you should not worry about that. So on day one, when those kits are born, you're going to count the kits. I like to get right in and really get in and make sure that I can count every single kit that's born. I'm looking for just some basic numbers so that we can keep records. The first is I keep number born alive. So I want to know exactly how many kits were born alive. I want to know how many were DOA or dead on arrival. And then just for my own sake, I like to guess as to potential colors and patterns. On between days 2 to 10, I count those kits every single day, because in the summertime, if you have a kit that dies for any reason, maybe got stepped on, maybe got a cut, maybe got pushed out of the litter, got too cold, for whatever the reason, if I find a deceased kit in the summertime, they can decompose so quickly and encourage flies, and fly strike will take out an entire litter in hours. Not an exaggeration. It is so dangerous. So make sure that you're checking and pulling out deceased kits in the summer. And then in the wintertime, a deceased kit can act like an ice cube and make the rest of the litter colder and harder to survive for them as well. Now here's an example of a litter. This was a litter that we had last summer. So on the right, this was day 1, and then on the left is I believe that was day 7. I would have to double check my records, but so you can see the difference there. They start getting some hair and looking really cute by day 7. Then on day 10, kids will start opening their eyes. They'll start to hop, and I actually like to tip the nest box on its side so that they can easily jump in and out. especially in the winter. In the summer, it doesn't matter as much because they'll find their way back into their nest box. But in the winter, a kit that has fallen out of the nest, even if it's fully haired, they will not survive if it drops below, sometimes even 40 degrees. So putting that nest box on the side is going to help with that. It's also going to help with cleaning and making sure that we don't have any nest box eye or other ailments. So I'd like to check that. On day 14, so when those kits are 2 weeks, they'll be hopping around the cage and they'll begin eating with their mom. I do not provide anything different for a doe that's nursing. I give her and her kits the exact same food. I just make sure that the kits can reach the dish and that they can reach the water bottle or the bowl. Then we have our weaning phase. We typically wean between 4 and 6 weeks. That's typically when they're ready to wean. Some signs that your litter's ready is if the doe is stressed and losing condition, she's not letting them nurse, and the kits are active and eating and drinking. That's a pretty good sign that they're ready to be moved. We don't want to move them too early, but we also don't want to move them too late if we really want to capitalize on efficiency. So at 8+ weeks, kits should not be, so this is law. Kits should not be rehomed until at least 8 weeks to avoid stress and illness. But mostly they should be completely weaned from their mom and removed into separate cages by the time that they're 8 weeks. This is going to be better for your doe and it's better for your kits in terms of their feed efficiency as well. The last part of breeding that we get asked a lot is rebreeding. When do we rebreed? How many litters do we get out of our rabbits? Rabbits can typically be rebred the day after giving birth. So if you're raising in a colony, this is something to keep in mind, is that colony raising can really wear a rabbit out because they do not get a break. I like to give our does 4 to 6 weeks minimum to recuperate before having another litter. So I like to wean at 4 weeks before. I like them to be at least weaned, and typically give them another 2 weeks to kind of get back on their feet before we breed again. So that's going to give you that 4 to 6 weeks. In our experience, that's a higher conception rate, lower mortality, and a more consistent milk production, all things that are going to be paramount in having a good breeding season. The other thing that we do, and this differs by doe to doe and sometimes litter to litter, is check your doe's condition. If she's got good fleshing and her fur looks healthy, she's likely ready to breed. I have a doe that the day I wean, she starts getting really feisty and she never loses condition. She keeps a good coat. And so I breed her back to back twice in the spring and twice in the fall. I have another doe that she has really large litters and she just takes a little bit more time. And so she gets bred. We spread her litters out throughout the year. The C that we're going to talk about in meat rabbits is culling. Now, this is maybe a little bit of a harder topic for people, and I think we see this in all of our livestock species. We develop a little bit of an emotional attachment to these animals that we know are providing for our family, and we're trying to give them the best life possible. So culling can be a hard decision. And raising rabbits is a constant series of difficult decisions, and each of those decisions has the potential to shape the future of your herd and your success in your rabbitry. One thing that I want to point out is that culling and dispatching are not the same thing. I see people use these terms interchangeably, and I think it's really important that we make sure that we're using them correctly. Cull means to remove from your herd. Dispatch is the process of humanely killing an animal for its useful purpose, whether that be food or fiber. So when we're talking about culling, that's evaluating your herd and making some decisions on what you're going to keep and feed and what you're going to dispatch or sell. There are two main reasons to cull. The first is to remove inferior animals from your breeding stock. This means young animals that aren't growing, maybe they have defects, or they just don't align with your breed standards or your goals. The second reason is to replace older animals and remove them from your breeding pool. So those young offspring with undesirable traits or characteristics, low heat tolerance, maybe they have poor conformation, such as pinched hindquarters, or disqualifications if you're raising show rabbits. In your established herd, health, injury, loss of productivity, maybe they're just not bouncing back as quickly, maybe you're having a hard time getting them to breed. Those are all examples of good reasons to cull. Another good rule of thumb is that you should be improving enough to replace your stock every 2 years. So if you are not you're not improving your stock frequently enough that you can replace your older does or your older bucks, then you need to maybe reevaluate your breeding practices and make sure that you reevaluate your goals and then cull. A really common term in the rabbit world is to cull hard and then cull harder, meaning there is no room for emotion when making these decisions, especially when we're trying to be sustainable and efficient. The first culling we do at 4 to 8 weeks. So know your goals for meat production, that's growth and conformation. When I get ready to wean, I'm going to evaluate the whole litter. The smallest rabbits are ones that are not meeting my minimum in terms of growth, and rabbits that have poor conformation are going to go into a grow out pen, and I'm not going to look at them again. That's my first culling. My second culling is going to be between 8 and 16 weeks. Again, for meat production, I'm looking for growth, I'm looking for conformation. At this point, I'm also going to be looking for some heat tolerance and then general health and condition. If I am finding a rabbit that is just not doing as well, they're prone to getting sick, then those are also rabbits or animals that I'm going to cull and not keep. The third culling is my individual close inspection. This is for older established animals. And remember that we're trying to improve with each and every litter. So I am going to be really intense on this last inspection and make sure that I'm keeping animals that are better than their parents and really aligning with my goals. I'm going to look for some quantitative traits like litter size, growth, weaning size. And then I'm also going to look for some maybe more qualitative traits like maternal instincts and personality. Some of my pet peeves are rabbits that dig in their feeder. You lose a lot of feed that way. I also really prioritize temperament. I've got little kids. I work with 4-H youth, and so I don't tolerate rabbits that bite or are just crazy hyper. And so that's just personal opinions there, but that is something that I evaluate for that third culling. And then finally, that general health and wellness. We want to make sure that we are only keeping the best, healthiest, easy growing, low maintenance rabbits in our herd and promoting those genetics. So I wanted to go over this close inspection for you. And so I like to do this with all of my rabbits, not just the ones that I'm inspecting to keep, but this is just a health inspection to make sure that they're in general healthy. I try to do this with each and every one of my rabbits at least once a month. Ideally, in a perfect world, I would be handling them every day or every other day. So for the inspection, I always start with the ears. I double check the tattoo, make sure that I have the right rabbit and I'm keeping good records. And then I'm going to look for redness, crustiness, and inflammation. If I have a rabbit that's prone to ear mites, that's going to be a cull for my herd. Same with the eyes. I don't want animals that are prone to eye infections. And I'm also just going to check and make sure that they're nice and clear and that they're not cloudy and healthy. I'm going to check for their general condition and their fur. I want rabbits that maintain their cover and finish and that have a high quality coat. And especially if I'm getting ready to rebreed them, I want them to maintain that condition. I'm going to check their mouth and nose for discharge. And even more importantly, I'm going to look for that teeth alignment. I know that there are some cases that rabbits will develop malocclusion because they bite the wire or from an injury, but I don't like to take that chance. And so if there are rabbits that have any sort of malocclusion, that means that their teeth don't align correctly. That is a hard cull for me. Partly because I just don't, in my opinion, that's not good animal husbandry to breed rabbits that have bad teeth because it affects their longevity and their way of life. But it also can be a little bit of a personality thing. And there's not a ton of research on how malocclusion is passed on. We just know that there is a genetic component. And so to me, it's just not worth the risk. Finally, I'm going to check the underside. We're going to look for abnormal lumps. We want to make sure that we have the correct amount of teats or nipples for our does so that they can provide for their kits. I'm going to look at legs and feet. So I want natural width. I want straight legs that are healthy. And then I'm going to look at their feet. Now, one thing that I think is really important for us to check is for sore hocks. In all my years of raising rabbits, I've only had 2 that got sore hocks, and it was a mother and a daughter. And both times it was when they had a solid surface to sit on and they ended up getting urine scald. So I cannot say this enough. Wire does not cause sore hocks. There is a genetic component to rabbits that are prone to getting sore hocks. And I fully believe that it's something that you should select for and get out of your herd. Finally, when I'm looking at inspection, I am just going to look for breeding soundness. So I'm going to check the sex of the rabbit. I'm going to look for testicular distension and abnormal redness in our bucks. And I just want to make sure that does are healthy and that there's no abnormal swelling or redness in our does. I'm also going to look for any sign of fly strike. If rabbits have been sitting in their urine or in their feces, that can draw flies. And just like flies can quickly overtake a litter, they can also be extremely detrimental to an older rabbit. And then last but not least, just take one last look. Does this rabbit add to your herd? Are they going to help you accomplish your goals? Or do you have something better in your barn? And that ultimately is going to be that cull decision. Is this a cull rabbit or a keeper? Now, I'm not going to talk about this a whole lot, but in our ABCs, D would be for dispatch. I mentioned this earlier that dispatch is humanely killing your rabbit and processing and getting it ready for harvest or harvesting, getting it ready for use as either food or fiber. So once you've decided which animals to keep and which to cull, you may decide to dispatch. So I just don't have the time or the resources to go over dispatching. I think that this is a topic that is better in person. So if you are interested in learning more about that, make sure that you email us afterwards so that you can get on our list when we start doing some of these in-person events, which we're hoping to do some this summer. But if you can't wait that long, there are plenty of great resources just on YouTube if you want to look into that. I highly recommend that you find someone that dispatches regularly and have them help you and teach you. So
Jessie, I'm just
with that
giving you
being
a 1 minute warning here.
perfect, I have 1 minute left. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that good luck on your meat rabbit journey. That's ultimately what I'm hoping to provide for you is just some basics and help build that foundation a little bit. And I also really appreciate this quote from Abraham Lincoln: "The greatest fine art of the future will be the making of a comfortable living from a small piece of land." And if you're here learning about meat rabbits or the majority, well, I would just say everything as a part of this conference, it's because you agree with this and you're trying to make the most out of your small piece of land. And I'm just glad that we're here to help you. So with that, here's my contact information. And if I can I can never get the screen to move when I need it to. There we go. So this is me and Jake. We had the opportunity to present on some of our meat rabbit research in Fort Worth last year. And so we're always happy to answer questions. Here's our phone number and our emails. If you have questions, we're always happy to answer those.